Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased today to submit to this Honorable House the annual report of the Human Rights Commission for the year ending December 31st, 2020. Mr. Speaker, the Commission has a statutory remit to protect and promote human rights under the Human Rights Act of 1981. The Commission's mandate is to both educate and promote the principles of non-discrimination and equality, to investigate and endeavor to settle allegations of discrimination. Mr. Speaker, the Human Rights Commission is required to encourage an understanding of the fundamental rights and freedoms of individuals guaranteed by the Constitution and the principle that all members of the community are of equal dignity and have equal rights and have an obligation to respect the dignity and rights of each other. Promote an understanding of, acceptance of, and compliance with the Human Rights Act of 1981. Conduct research and develop initiatives designed to eliminate discriminatory practices, encourage and coordinate activities which seek to forward the principles that every member of the community is of equal dignity and has equal rights, and promote the conciliation and settlement of any complaints or grievances arising out of acts of unlawful discrimination, and where in its opinion such good offices are inappropriate, institute prosecution for the contraventions of the Act. Mr. Speaker, the Human Rights Commission provides assistance to those who believe they have experienced discrimination or have any questions related to their rights and responsibilities under the Human Rights Act. The Commission is both a public watchdog for human rights compliance and a resource to foster and promote human rights principles by working with stakeholders across the island, including government, community organizations, schools, businesses, and individuals. Mr. Speaker, the Commission works to further its objective of eradicating discrimination through the following means: helping to address any and all queries related to human rights in Bermuda, assisting with complaints of discrimination under the Human Rights Act of 1981, providing dispute resolution services through mediation and conciliation to help settle complaints of discrimination, policy review and guidance with all stakeholders in support of human rights obligations, engaging in collaborative presentations, research, and educational programming, consultations to support the evolution of legislation, just practices, and policies in support of human rights compliance, educational presentations, workshops, and training tailored to meet the stakeholders' needs in support of their human rights, education, and compliance commitments, advice and consultation with government on proposed legislative amendments and to ensure consistency with international standards, administering the Human Rights Tribunal, providing guidance to government, organizations, businesses, and educational institutions on the development and implementation of a human rights-based approach to legislation, policies, programs, and complaint handling mechanisms to ensure compliance with the Act and international human rights agreements. Mr. Speaker, included in the annual report, you will note that during the 2020 calendar year, the Commission received 140 complaints, with the majority of complaints citing claims of discriminatory differences in treatment on the grounds of disability, 31%, place of origin, 16%, sex, 14%, and race, 8%. Of those complaints, the majority cited claims of discrimination which within the protected area of employment at 59%. Claims of discriminatory practice harassment amounted to 9% of intakes, or the total intakes received in 2020. Of the total intakes received in 2020, 10% remain ongoing, and the remaining 126, 90% resolved. As 2020 unfolded against the trauma and uncertainty of COVID-19 pandemic, the government of Bermuda faced a challenging balance of the public health measures against safeguarding of civil liberties and human rights. The complex nature of COVID-19 crisis reaffirmed the critical role of the national human rights institutions in promoting a human rights-based approach to managing the pandemic. Fundamental considerations around the individual and collective rights emerged in response to the crisis as Bermuda recognized we are only as safe and secure as our most vulnerable. The themes of resilience and reckoning became the emblematic of a year defined by social justice and advocacy. The resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement following the murder of George Floyd in the United States, so over 7,000 Bermudians converge in solidarity to support this historic human rights movement. The Commission partnered with Citizens Uprooting Racism in Bermuda, CURB, to produce the Black History in Bermuda timeline. Contemporary research by historians and academics continues to fill a massive void left by earlier works focused on select descriptions of Bermuda's colonial history, largely erasing the Black narrative. This evolving resource, continues to benefit the contribution of historians and knowledge bearers. The Commission joined Bermuda in mourning the passing of Dr. Eva Hudson. Dr. Hudson dedicated her life to elevating the national consciousness to address the scourge of racism. Her remarkable example and body of work will continue to inform Bermuda's human rights education and enlighten generations to come. An equal world is an enabled world was the International Women's Day theme. The Commission joined stakeholders at a convening hosted by the Women's Resource Center to recalibrate collective commitments to accelerate gender parity to ensure a more equitable Bermuda. Data published by the UN Women early in the COVID-19 outbreak revealed that gender-based violence, particularly domestic violence against women and girls, had intensified worldwide. Due to COVID-19, Pride 2020 was a stark contrast to the jubilant celebrations of 2019. However, it was no less significant. The 8th of August convening marked the 7th anniversary of the amendment to include sexual orientation in the Human Rights Act of 1981. The executive officer's remarks emphasized that addition of sexual orientation as a protective ground enhanced Bermuda's human rights framework and renewed our commitment to the fundamental right of freedoms of all. Mr. Speaker, in accordance with the Section 30A of the Human Rights Act of 1981, I am pleased to have laid before this Honorable House the Human Rights Commission's annual report for the year ending December 31st, 2020. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.